The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Well, right now I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we can easily take for granted, digging into history and languages, when I'm able to try and get at the heart of the text so that we can hopefully see and then apply at least a little of what God has for us in these words today. Now, I'm not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth. That's something that we can all do, so I hope that you will be doing that with me. We have been going through the book of Proverbs, and we've landed now at Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19. In the ESV, that reads, "There are 6 things that Yahweh hates." And that's Yahweh's God's personal name. That's what's going on in the original language whenever you see Lord in all caps. There are 6 things that Yahweh hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. So just starting with that first verse, there are 6 things that Yahweh hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. The author is introducing this list of sins that Yahweh stands in complete opposition to and finds disgusting. They reflect the opposite of who God is in his character. That's something interesting about God's commands, is so many of them, if you look at them, in fact, the vast majority of them, if you look at them, they will say something by way of contrast about the character of God. And so that's something that's, I think, going to be significant with some of the thoughts that I particularly had about these verses, and I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, so these commands and these sins that are being described reflect the opposite of who God is in his character and what he has made humans to be. Now, it's not an exhaustive list of sins or a complete list of God's most hated sins or something like that. This is a malleable, incomplete list as indicated by the change from numbering them 6 to numbering them 7 in the introduction. The sins listed here have significant overlap as well with those mentioned in verses 11 through 15. So this may be intended as a further development of those ideas. Looking at verse 17 now, haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. Okay, haughty is not a word we use commonly, at least not with that spelling, right? The Hebrew word conveys the idea of exalting oneself. We have haughty eyes when our perspective assigns higher significance to ourselves than we should. This expression is used elsewhere in the Bible to describe rulers who thought too much of themselves. You can see that in Isaiah 10, 12 through 14, Daniel 11, 12, and Isaiah 2, 11 through 17, just some examples. A lying tongue is just what it sounds like. And the verses leading up to these expand on the nature of deception in more detail. So if you go back to the verses we looked at last time, it expands on the idea of deception more. What's interesting to me is how this is listed here without distinction in severity right next to both a prideful attitude and murder. Now, this isn't to say that God makes no distinction in severity between these sins, but I think it offers a check for our attitudes when we tell ourselves, well, yeah, I have that sin in my life, but at least I don't have that one. God is outraged and disgusted by murder. He is also outraged and disgusted by prideful attitudes and deceptive social maneuvering. Now, regarding God's hatred of hands that shed innocent blood, it's worth remembering that all human life is valuable, innocent or not, because we were made to reflect God in some way. And so that's why God hates and forbids murder, as we see in Genesis 9, 5 through 6. That's the reasoning that he gives there, that human life is precious. But the addition of the word innocent here does, I think, seem to compound the evil being done. Now, in either case, when we hear news of murder, it registers often, at least for me, and I suspect for many of us, as little more than a statistic for us most of the time. But it's important to remember that God does not view any murder that way. He is not indifferent or removed from injustice. When no one else seems to care, God is both mourning and furious when someone is murdered, because every human being is deeply and individually loved by him. Verse 18 now, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil. The first phrase is a return to the idea of a heart that devises evil, as mentioned already in verse 14. We looked at that last time. As practical and action-oriented as many proverbs and commands in Scripture are, our inward thought lives, driven by our will, are where where our sin starts. The second phrase, feet that make haste to run to evil, describes someone who eagerly and with a sort of all-in attitude embraces destructive behavior. And verse 19, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. The idea of a false witness, I wouldn't be surprised if it brings to mind the Ten Commandments of Exodus 20. It's likely meant to, I think. The concept certainly evokes and pertains to deception during legal proceedings, as we would see in the phrase false witness, but it applies to everyday life situations as well, and we see that in how it's applied throughout Scripture. Now, someone who breathes out lies is lying often and extensively. Both deception and creating friction among people are mentioned again here, as they were already in verses 12 through 14. So again, we're getting, in some ways, a restatement, retreading of some ground, which is one reason why some believe that it's meant to be an expansion upon some of those same ideas. Okay, so what is in all of this that's maybe specific for geeks? As I was looking at these verses, it occurred to me that God hates these sins in large part because of how deeply and intensely he loves the people that are affected by them. And a common link between all of these sins and so many others is an elevating of self and a disregard for the value of other people. Maybe not necessarily like, oh, they are nothing compared to me. It's not, that mustache twirly kind of villainous disregard for people, but I think it certainly can become that. And these extremes we're seeing, I think there's probably some of that in there, this really extreme devaluing of other people. But there's also just the lesser sense in which we just don't really think about other people. We don't prioritize thinking about the value of other people. As I've mentioned before, as geeks, we have often very active thought lives. And those thoughts most often place us at the center. Even if we're thinking about other people, we're thinking, oh, what did they think of me? How did they treat me? And stuff like that. So there's still kind of us at the center of our thoughts very, very often. And entertainment constantly feeds us a messed up value system, making it second nature to look at our value in terms of our significance compared to everyone else. So we center our thoughts on ourselves and sort of make ourselves the hero or the main character in our own little story, and other people become maybe allies at best, or obstacles or villains in our little story, as it were. And it's this devaluing of others, admittedly done on a near subconscious level, that makes it easier for us to lie, to subtly manipulate, or to unfairly evaluate other people. God is calling us to step outside of our own enclosed mental space and remember that everyone else is just as precious and has their own very real and complex life going on that we are completely unaware of. And that's not a lot of hyperbole. Even knowing my wife as closely as I do, I don't know her thought life. I'm still learning things about her. And there's just a completely unknown internal life that she has, internal struggles that she has, that she can share those struggles with me now and then verbally, but I'm not along for that ride with her. She has her own way and context and emotional context and thought life related to God, related to family, all these other things. She's just a different person that is separate from me, but her life, her thoughts are no less real, no less complex, no less valuable to God. And so I think it's really worthwhile for us to at least endeavor to remember that about the people that we're interacting with. As part of engaging in the jaw-droppingly significant purpose that God made us for, He also wants us to see the value and purpose He has given to those that we interact with, and think of them and treat them in light of that shocking reality. If you'd like some help finding a good church in your area, I would love to help you do that if I can. Online resources and communities are good supplements, but by nature they just can't speak to your particular situation like relationships in a local church can. The context for almost everything in the New Testament assumes that we're serving and building purposeful relationships in a local church. So whether you're in a church that just kind of lacks Bible-based intentionality, or maybe not attending any church at all, if I can help you get connected to an authentic, compassionate, Bible-oriented church, I want to do that. You can email me at paeter@spiritblade.com, and we can look at some websites of churches in your area together.